The Young and the Restless Spoilers hospitals are strange places for men like Nick Newman. Built of sterile walls and hushed voices, they offer no control, no power, only reflection, pain, and the sharp ache of helplessness. Nick lay unconscious for hours after the rescue, barely clinging to life, the stab wound across his side having gone untreated for too long. Machines blinked beside him. Nurses whispered coded updates in the hall. And outside the glass pane separating the ICU from the rest of the world, Sharon Newman watched every breath he took like it was her own. Her hands were clasped together so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale. Sally stood nearby, drained and silent. Chance paced like a man trying to chase thoughts faster than his fear. But no one spoke the question aloud, what if Nick never woke up? When he finally did, it was with a stifled groan and a haunted look in his eyes. As if some part of him had returned while another stayed behind in the darkness of that cellar. His body was broken, but his mind was worse. His first words weren't about himself. They were about Sharon. About Faith. About the killer who was still out there. And deep down, he knew what no one else had dared to voice, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The man who had stabbed him, killed Damien, and nearly ended this twisted chapter in Nice wasn't finished. And the next move would be the cruelest yet. It came just 2 hours later, in the form of a phone call, one that bypassed security, nurses, even Sharon herself. A private line lit up beside Nick's hospital bed. The ringtone was a piercing tone that jolted him from the haze of painkillers and gauze. He answered instinctively, his voice hoarse, broken, but unmistakably angry. There was silence on the other end. Then a whisper. Low. Confident. Calculated. You're alive. That's unfortunate. The caller didn't give a name. He didn't need to. Nick's fists clenched beneath the sheets. You took your time bleeding, the voice continued. But don't worry, we're not done yet. You have one daughter, don't you? The pause that followed was long enough to feel like a blade. Faith. If you don't come to me, she dies. The call ended without instructions. No location. No demand. Just a promise of death and a time bomb of dread. Sharon arrived seconds later to see Nick ripping out his trying to swing his legs over the bed, biting back the scream of pain that rose in his throat. They have Faith, he choked, eyes wild. They're going to kill her. Sharon froze, every memory of every kidnapping, every past trauma surging back like a hurricane. Faith had been taken before. She had survived. But this time felt different. This wasn't about leverage. It was about revenge. Cold, merciless revenge. They alerted Chance immediately. A search order was placed. A bolo went out. Victor was notified, and his private security network was activated across 3 countries. But none of that mattered to Nick. His body might have been tied down by stitches and a nearly collapsed lung, but his soul was already running through every alleyway in Nice, looking for his daughter. Sharon stood at the edge of the hospital window, her nails digging into the sill, her breath shallow. This wasn't just about Faith. This was about the war being waged on their entire family. Meanwhile, Faith, calm in a way only those born into chaos can be, sat quietly in a darkened room. Her wrists weren't bound, the man who took her knew she wasn't a threat. The door was locked from the outside, the windows barred. But her eyes scanned every corner, every reflection. She remembered the last time. She remembered surviving. And she remembered her father's voice, telling her she was stronger than anything the world could throw at her. She believed it now more than ever. Back in the hospital, Nick pleaded with Sharon to let him go, to help him find Faith. She refused, not because she didn't want to, but because she knew if he stood up too quickly, he'd collapse before the elevator reached the lobby. But Nick wasn't thinking with his body. He was thinking with his heart. With his guilt. with the crushing weight of knowing that if he had died in that cellar, Faith would now be alone, hunted. And worse, he began to wonder if this was all connected, if the killer had always planned to hurt Faith next, whether Nick lived or not. The phone rang again. This time, Sharon answered. Her hands trembled. The voice was the same. No laughter. No theatrics. You have 6 hours. If he doesn't show up, your daughter stops breathing. Tell him to come alone. He'll know where. The line cut. Sharon turned, and for the first time in weeks, she saw real fear in Nick's eyes. He knew where. An abandoned hunting cabin just outside the city, a place Nick had once taken Faith as a child. A place only family would know. Which meant the killer knew them. Intimately. Personally. That changed everything. Theories began to swirl. Was it Carter? Someone working under Colin? Or was Colin himself still alive, pulling strings from the shadows, seeking ultimate destruction not just of Nick, but of everyone he loved? Whatever the answer, Nick's choice was no longer a choice. It was destiny. He would go. With or without approval. With or without backup. And as he limped out of the hospital that evening, his body held together by sheer will and the pain of a father's broken heart, Sharon followed behind him, knowing this could be the last time she saw either of them alive. Because love, in Genoa City, had always demanded sacrifice. And sometimes, that sacrifice bled. Let me know if you'd like me to continue the kidnapping rescue, have Faith attempt an escape, or reveal the true identity of the killer in the next chapter. We can take this storyline to its most intense climax. There are moments in life when time slows, not because the world grants mercy, but because the weight of love, fear, and regret is too great to bear all at once. Sharon Newman stood over Nick's hospital bed, the machines humming their cold rhythm beside him, and realized with painful clarity that the man she had spent most of her adult life loving might not live to hear the words she had never said out loud. His face, pale and slack against the pillow, was the face she knew better than her own, the furrow of his brow, the faint scar along his jaw, the way his lips curled in sleep when he dreamt of their children or the life they might have had. And yet, despite everything, the history, the betrayals, the long nights of reconciliation and heartbreak, he had insisted they remain friends. And she had agreed. Because Nick's friendship had always been enough. Until now. The memory of their entrapment still echoed in her bones, the cold floor of the storage room, the terror that Faith might never see them again, the certainty that no one was coming to help. But Nick had stayed strong, even while bleeding, even while crumpling to the floor in agony. He had whispered to her not to be afraid, to hold on, to believe. And she had. That bond, forged in the worst of circumstances, had pulled them closer again even when words failed. Sharon had always loved Nick. Through his chaos, his stubbornness, his misguided sense of justice, she loved him still. But now, as he hovered between life and death, she was forced to confront the unbearable truth. She might lose him without ever telling him she never stopped believing in them. Nick had been there for her during the painful unraveling of the Heather Stevens case, never wavering, never doubting her innocence, even when the rest of Genoa City whispered behind closed doors. He stood by her during the media circus, the legal threats, the endless questions. He held her hand through every court date, every hospital visit, every sleepless night when Sharon couldn't trust her own memories. In those moments, Nick became more than a friend. He became her anchor. And now, the roles had reversed. He was the one in pain, trapped inside a body struggling to survive, and Sharon was left to find the strength to protect him, to fight for him the way he once fought for her. In the chaos surrounding Faith's kidnapping, the pursuit of the real killer, and the unraveling of Carter's web of deception, Sharon's emotions had been buried under adrenaline. But now, in the quiet of Nick's hospital room, with every monitor beat marking another moment stolen from fate, those feelings surged to the surface. She sat beside him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead, and whispered the words that had haunted her since that night in the cellar. You can't leave me, Nick. I'm not done needing you. She meant it. In every sense. What Nick had given her over the years was not just protection, it was a belief in her goodness, even when she doubted herself. That kind of belief doesn't vanish with time. It only deepens. And now that he lay wounded, facing the very real possibility of never returning to the world they knew, Sharon felt the walls she had built to protect herself, to protect their fragile peace, begin to crumble. She wanted more. She always had. But she never wanted to ask unless he could give it freely. Now, with death knocking at the door, she realized the risk of never knowing was worse than the risk of rejection. Nick stirred. His eyes fluttered open, groggy, disoriented. He tried to sit up but groaned as the pain in his side flared hot. Sharon pressed her hand gently against his shoulder, easing him back down. "You're okay," she murmured. "You're safe." But he wasn't safe. Not really. The internal bleeding had slowed, but infection was a threat. And emotionally, the trauma hadn't even begun to settle. Still, he looked at her with the same stubborn resolve he always carried, as if even the Reaper himself couldn't take him unless Nick Newman decided it was time. "What happened to Faith?" he rasped, his voice raw. Sharon swallowed, trying to steady her emotions. "She's safe," she lied. Not because she intended to deceive him, but because she knew the truth would kill him faster than the wound ever could. Chance was still out searching. Victor had deployed his men. Phyllis had even gone rogue, breaking into Carter's encrypted files for clues. But no one knew where the killer had taken Faith. Only that he had called twice more. No ransom. No demands. Only threats. Nick closed his eyes, a tear slipping down the side of his face. "I should have protected her," he whispered. Sharon shook her head. "You almost died saving me. Don't you dare blame yourself." But Nick did. He always had. Every loss, every mistake, he carried it. And now, knowing that Faith might be suffering because of a vendetta against him was a wound deeper than any blade could reach. Sharon saw it, and it broke her. "You've given everything to this family, Nick. Everything. Let us fight for you now." He turned to her slowly, his gaze locking with hers, and in that moment something shifted. There was no sarcasm, no deflection. Only vulnerability. "I don't want to die without telling you something," he said. Her breath caught in her throat. "I don't think I ever stopped loving you. I just thought we were better off not trying again." Her heart cracked open, but she didn't cry. Instead, she leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. "Then fight, Nick. Stay alive long enough to mean it. Because I never stopped either." Outside the room, Victor received a message from one of his operatives, a location ping from a burner phone used in the kidnapper's last call. The team was mobilizing. There was hope. But for Sharon and Nick, the only moment that mattered was now. This brush with death had clarified everything, how fragile love is, how rare second chances are, and how the deepest connections are forged not in perfect moments, but in fire and pain. If Nick survived, nothing would be the same. Not between them. Not with Faith. Not in the way they saw each other ever again. Because in that near-death silence, they had finally said the words that fear had silenced for too long. And in Genoa City, that kind of truth changes everything. Let me know if you'd like to continue with the rescue mission for Faith, Nick's recovery, or the reappearance of Colin with shocking new motives. The story is ready for the next dramatic twist.